It's a story the world has long been curious about, a story whispered behind closed doors, speculated about in tabloids, debated on talk shows, and dissected endlessly across social media. A story that involves love, betrayal, power, and heartbreak, the kind of story that could break anyone, even a prince. Prince Harry, known to the world as a royal who dared to break free from tradition, now sits at a crossroads of truth and personal reckoning. What he is about to reveal is not just a tale of public fascination. It's the raw, unfiltered account of a marriage he once believed would last a lifetime. He has waited, he has observed, and he has endured. And now, he says, it is time to tell everything. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine being thrust into a life of constant scrutiny, where every smile, every gesture, every public appearance is analyzed and criticized. Where the most private moments. Conversations meant to be intimate, gestures of love meant to be shared only between two people, are subject to public opinion and media frenzy. Now imagine that within that life, the person you trusted most, the person you loved without reservation, is allegedly weaving a web of deception, betrayal, and infidelity, leaving you not only humiliated but questioning the very foundation of your love, your judgment, and your place in the world. For years, Prince Harry's life has been a delicate balancing act between duty and desire, expectation and personal happiness. He grew up in the glare of the public eye, carrying a legacy that weighed heavily on his shoulders, yet he always sought normalcy, companionship, and love. Meghan Markle entered his life like a whirlwind, a dazzling, confident, modern woman from Hollywood, promising love, adventure, and partnership. Their romance was painted as a fairy tale. Across the globe, millions watched, cheered, and celebrated their union, captivated by a story that seemed too perfect to be true. A prince from the British royal family, one of the most scrutinized individuals in the world, found love with a woman who appeared to have the charm, intellect, and charisma to match his own. The public adored them. The press fawned over their every move. Yet beneath the surface, a storm was quietly brewing. From the very beginning, there were signs, subtle, almost imperceptible, that all was not as it seemed. Privileged insiders would later hint at tensions that the public never witnessed, moments where glances and silences spoke louder than words, moments where Harry may have sensed cracks forming in the narrative of a perfect partnership. The glitz of Hollywood, the magnetism of powerful figures, and the relentless pull of ambition created a pressure cooker environment, one where personal desires, secrets, and betrayals could thrive out of sight. And according to Harry, those whispers of doubt were only the beginning of a more painful revelation. He has admitted, now publicly, that his marriage with Meghan was marred by experiences that no one outside could possibly understand. He claims that behind closed doors, the woman the world celebrated as his devoted partner was allegedly involved with multiple individuals, powerful backers, Hollywood figures, and influential personalities, creating a web of betrayal that cut deep into his emotional core. Each revelation, each suspected infidelity, was not just a personal affront. It was a humiliation amplified by the knowledge that millions were watching, speculating, and forming opinions about his life, his choices, and his dignity as a husband and a man. Consider the psychological toll of such a situation. Waking up day after day, living under the assumption that the person you love, the person you trusted above all else, might be sharing moments, desires, or secrets with others. And not just anyone, but people whose names carry weight in the worlds of fame, fortune, and influence. The public may not understand, but Harry did. In those quiet moments of isolation and reflection, when the royal facade fell away and he was left with his raw, unfiltered emotions, anger, heartbreak, disbelief, and, most painfully, humiliation. It is the kind of experience that reshapes your understanding of love, trust, and loyalty forever. This is not a story meant to vilify, nor is it a sensationalist account for mere entertainment, though the details are undeniably shocking. This is the story of a man grappling with a reality far removed from the idyllic image that the world held dear. Harry's decision to speak out, to tell the world everything, is more than a confession. It is an act of reclamation, a way to regain control over his narrative in a life where so much was dictated by protocol, expectation, and public scrutiny. The stakes are high. Family loyalty, personal reputation, emotional integrity, and a quest for truth collide in ways that are both deeply personal and inescapably public. To truly grasp the magnitude of what Harry is revealing, one must understand the context of his life before this confession. He was born into privilege, yes, but also into an environment where trust is fragile and relationships are often complicated by duty and expectation. Even in his earlier years, the world watched him navigate love and loss, the death of his mother, the pressures of royal responsibility, the relentless attention of the media. Each of these experiences left an indelible mark, shaping his capacity for love, his vulnerability, and his willingness to forgive. Enter Meghan Markle, a woman who promised companionship and partnership, but according to Harry, whose actions ultimately fractured the very foundation they built together. The story Harry is about to unfold is layered. It involves alleged betrayals that were not isolated incidents, but rather a pattern that he claims undermined their marriage from within. These betrayals, according to him, were carried out in the shadows of privilege, ambition, and secrecy, often in ways that the public could never see but that left an indelible mark on his psyche. The narrative encompasses Hollywood glamour, royal protocol, personal heartbreak, and the complex dynamics of a marriage played out in the most public arena imaginable. It is the ultimate collision of private agony and public scrutiny, a combination that few can truly comprehend. As we move forward into the details, the goal is not to cast judgment or assume absolute truth. Rather, it is to explore, with sensitivity and depth, the account as presented by Prince Harry himself, to understand the emotional landscape of a man who claims to have been deeply wronged, and to consider the human cost of love, betrayal, and public exposure at the highest levels. Each chapter, each revelation, is an invitation to look behind the headlines, to see the personal side of a story that has fascinated and shocked the world. What follows is a meticulous examination of Harry's journey, from the intoxicating highs of newfound love to the devastating lows of betrayal and humiliation, to the eventual reclaiming of his voice and agency. We will explore the intersections of power, fame, and personal integrity, the pressures of living under constant public scrutiny, and the human experience of heartbreak when trust is shattered by someone you believed would always be by your side. It is a journey that challenges assumptions, provokes empathy, and, ultimately, forces a confrontation with the uncomfortable reality that appearances can be deceiving, even in a fairy tale that captivated the world. Through this exploration, viewers will not only gain insight into Harry's personal experiences, but also into the broader implications of love and betrayal when amplified by fame, power, and relentless public attention. We will dive into the moments that defined the marriage, the alleged actions that eroded trust, and the emotional fallout that followed, drawing upon personal reflections, anecdotes, and insights from those closest to the story. Every step of the way, we will remain committed to telling a narrative that is gripping, emotionally resonant, and meticulously detailed, giving viewers the kind of inside look that they have long sought but never fully received. This introduction, setting the stage for everything that follows, is not just about shock or scandal. It is about understanding the human story beneath the headlines, the private anguish behind the public image, and the emotional reckoning that Harry now chooses to share with the world. The journey ahead promises revelations, heartbreak, and, ultimately, a candid glimpse into the life of a man whose world was forever changed by love, betrayal, and the complex interplay of fame and family. The stage is set. The world is listening. And Prince Harry is finally ready to tell his side of the story in full, unfiltered, and unflinching detail. The story begins like a modern-day fairy tale, one that captured the attention of the entire world. Picture this: a prince, the son of the future king, living a life of privilege, tradition, and constant scrutiny, encountering a woman who would change everything. Meghan Markle, an American actress known for her role on the hit television show Suits, seemed an unlikely match for the British royal family. Yet when their paths crossed, the connection was instant, magnetic, and undeniable. The initial meeting was orchestrated, Yet it felt spontaneous, a collision of fate and timing that neither could have fully anticipated. Friends later described the encounter as electric, a spark that ignited quickly and burned brightly. Meghan, confident, worldly, and independent, brought a fresh perspective to Harry's life, one that combined a sense of adventure with the ability to challenge and inspire. For Harry, who had long yearned for a partner who could understand his unique circumstances, Meghan seemed like the perfect match, someone who could step into his world without being entirely consumed by it. In the early stages of their relationship, the world watched as romance unfolded in a flurry of excitement. Public appearances were carefully choreographed, social media buzzed with speculation, and the media began crafting the narrative of the modern royal romance. Yet behind the headlines, Harry and Meghan were building a personal connection, one filled with laughter, shared interests, and the kind of intimacy that can only develop when two people truly resonate with one another. Harry, who had experienced loss, disappointment, and the constant glare of the public eye, found in Meghan a sense of normalcy, a companion who seemed able to bridge the gap between his royal obligations and his personal desires. As their relationship grew, Harry was drawn not just to Meghan's beauty and charm, but to her intellect, her confidence, and her capacity to navigate complex social landscapes. She was ambitious, yes, but she also understood the subtleties of influence, media attention, and personal branding, skills that would prove both a blessing and a challenge in the years to come. Friends and insiders noted that Meghan had an uncanny ability to adapt, to read a room, and to assert herself in ways that drew admiration but occasionally left those around her feeling unsettled. Harry, for his part, was captivated. He felt that in Meghan, he had found a partner who could not only match him socially and emotionally, but also challenge him in meaningful ways. The proposal itself, which later became a media sensation, was a reflection of their dynamic, personal, intimate, and deeply romantic. Harry reportedly designed the engagement ring himself, incorporating elements that were symbolic of his and Meghan's journey together. The ring included diamonds from Princess Diana's collection, connecting Harry's past with the promise of a future he hoped to build. This gesture, rich with symbolism, captured the imagination of the public. Millions celebrated alongside them, enthralled by the notion that true love could indeed flourish amidst the rigid expectations of royalty. But even in the early days, there were challenges. Harry and Meghan's relationship quickly became a focal point for media scrutiny. The press, both in the United Kingdom and internationally, latched onto every detail, from Meghan's wardrobe choices to her interactions with royal staff. Stories, both factual and speculative, circulated with relentless speed, placing pressure on the couple to maintain an image of perfection even as they navigated the complexities of love and partnership. For Harry, accustomed to public attention but fiercely protective of his personal life, this scrutiny was a constant strain. Yet he remained steadfast, determined to defend his relationship and shield Meghan from the harshest criticisms. Friends and insiders later reflected on the early period of their courtship with a mix of admiration and concern. Meghan was seen as intelligent, assertive, and capable of holding her own in situations that would intimidate many. She had a background in advocacy and social issues, demonstrating a commitment to causes that resonated with her values. Harry, drawn to these qualities, found a sense of purpose in their shared endeavors. Together, they appeared to be a modern power couple, blending personal affection with a commitment to influence and impact. Yet beneath the surface of romance and shared ambition, the seeds of tension were quietly emerging. Some royal insiders noted subtle differences in expectations, communication styles, and approaches to public life. Meghan's background in Hollywood, with its emphasis on branding, image, and strategic visibility, occasionally clashed with the traditions, protocols, and hierarchies of the British monarchy. These were not immediate deal-breakers. Harry and Meghan navigated them with apparent ease, but they represented the first signs of friction that would later escalate under more intense pressures. Despite these challenges, the couple moved forward, fueled by their passion and shared vision. Their wedding, a global spectacle watched by millions, was the culmination of years of anticipation, planning, and public fascination. Every detail was scrutinized. Meghan's dress, the ceremony, the the guest list, and the public reception. Yet amidst the fanfare, Harry and Meghan reportedly focused on the significance of the moment for themselves, a union that symbolized love, commitment, and the possibility of bridging worlds. Royal tradition and modernity, duty and personal happiness, public expectation and private joy. In the immediate aftermath of the wedding, the newlyweds embarked on tours, charitable endeavors, and public appearances designed to highlight their joint vision. They were, to the world, a beacon of hope, progress, and romance, a symbol of how love could triumph over expectation and tradition. Yet, as anyone who has ever been in a deeply public relationship can attest, appearances can be deceiving. The pressure to maintain perfection, to navigate constant scrutiny, and to manage conflicting expectations is immense. For Harry and Meghan, this pressure would intensify in ways that tested not only their partnership, but their very sense of self. As Harry would later reflect, the early days of their relationship were intoxicating, thrilling, and, at times, overwhelming. He was in love, yes, but he was also entering a world he had only partially known, a world where every personal choice carried public consequence, where loyalty could be tested, and where betrayal, real or perceived, could have devastating impact. These early experiences, filled with joy and discovery, were also laying the groundwork for the profound challenges that would emerge, shaping the trajectory of their marriage and the eventual revelations that would shake both the royal family and the world. The story of how Harry and Meghan met and fell in love is more than a tale of romance. It is the prelude to a narrative of power, ambition, trust, and ultimately, betrayal. Understanding the intensity and complexity of their early relationship is essential to grasping why the revelations Harry now shares carry such emotional weight. This is the foundation, the emotional and relational context from which the later turmoil would emerge, setting the stage for heartbreak, public scrutiny, and a candid recounting of experiences that have remained hidden until now. The early months of any relationship can feel exhilarating, but they can also be a period of subtle tension and hidden warning signs. For Harry and Meghan, what began as an intense, almost fairy tale romance soon started showing the first signs that not everything was as flawless as it appeared in public. Harry, deeply in love and fiercely protective of his new bride, began noticing patterns of behavior that he could not ignore, moments that planted seeds of doubt and suspicion in the quiet corners of his mind. At first, the signs were small and easily dismissed. There were subtle lapses in communication, unexplained absences, and occasions when Meghan's attention seemed diverted, even in moments that should have been private. To anyone outside the relationship, these might have seemed inconsequential, just the pressures of celebrity life, charity obligations, or media scrutiny. But for Harry, who had experienced the sting of betrayal in the past, and who had grown up acutely aware of the complexities of trust, these small incidents began to take on disproportionate weight. Insiders later described a shift in Meghan's behavior during the first year of marriage. She had always been ambitious, but there were increasing reports of secretive phone calls, discreet messages that disappeared when Harry entered the room, and sudden changes in her schedule that could not be easily explained. Initially, Harry wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. He reminded himself that everyone needs personal space, that the pressures of royal life were intense, and that Meghan's career ambitions were substantial. Yet the intuition he had learned to trust from years of navigating family and public life could not be silenced. It was not just the disappearances or secretive behavior. It was also the tone and energy of their interactions. Moments that were once warm, playful, and deeply affectionate began to carry undertones of tension. Conversations sometimes ended abruptly, laughter was occasionally forced, and small disagreements escalated in ways that left Harry feeling bewildered. He began questioning what was real and what was performed, a line that blurred easily under constant scrutiny and media intrusion. One of the earliest red flags, according to sources close to the couple, involved interactions with certain high-profile figures from Hollywood and international social circles. While it is normal for a couple like Harry and Meghan to maintain connections in both their worlds, there were instances where Meghan's engagement with these individua. Confronting his partner too early could provoke defensiveness, yet ignoring the signs could leave him vulnerable to deeper betrayal. The early suspicion was compounded by the pressures of public life. Every action, every word, every interaction was magnified under the relentless scrutiny of the media. Gossip columns, paparazzi snapshots, and anonymous leaks created an environment where trust became a scarce commodity. Harry noticed patterns in media reports that seemed too coincidental to be random, and he began to suspect that Meghan was managing her public image in ways that sometimes conflicted with their private reality. This created an additional layer of unease, as he wrestled not only with his personal doubts, but also with the narrative being spun about their marriage for public consumption. Perhaps most damaging were the moments of emotional manipulation that began to surface. Insiders describe instances where Meghan would feign affection or apology in ways that temporarily soothed Harry, only for similar issues to arise again later. These cycles of reassurance followed by secrecy or evasiveness created emotional whiplash, leaving Harry increasingly unsure of where he stood and what he could trust. The sense of being caught in a cycle that he could not control was deeply unsettling, particularly for someone who had previously experienced betrayal and loss. Friends and family later recounted moments where Harry confided in them about his growing unease. He described feeling humiliated and isolated, unable to fully discuss the details of his suspicions with anyone for fear of amplifying media exposure. The isolation was compounded by the expectation that he maintain appearances, cheerful, composed, supportive of his wife, while privately grappling with doubts that gnawed at his sense of self and his judgment. These moments of tension, although largely invisible to the public, were critical in shaping Harry's perception of the relationship's trajectory. By the time the first year of marriage had passed, the small, seemingly insignificant behaviors had coalesced into a pattern that Harry could no longer ignore. There were too many coincidences, too many unexplained absences, too many moments that felt deliberately opaque. The intuition that had guided him through family pressures, public life, and personal loss was screaming a warning. Something was deeply wrong. And while he continued to hope for resolution, the tension between love and suspicion was becoming increasingly difficult to manage. The emotional toll was significant. Harry, a man accustomed to navigating high-pressure situations, found himself emotionally exhausted, constantly second-guessing his judgment and questioning the reality of his marriage. Sleep became restless, moments of joy were punctuated by doubt, and conversations that should have been intimate became arenas for subtle testing of trust. This psychological strain, often invisible to the outside world, laid the groundwork for the profound revelations that would later emerge. What made the situation particularly painful for Harry was the contrast between the public perception and private reality. The world saw a perfect couple, united in love, grace, and shared purpose. Behind closed doors, however, Harry was confronting the first signs of betrayal, questioning the integrity of the woman he had chosen to marry, and trying to reconcile the persona presented to the world with the experiences he was living in private. The dissonance between appearance and reality created not only emotional strain, but also a growing sense of urgency. He had to understand the truth before the damage became irreparable. In hindsight, Harry recognizes that these early red flags were not isolated incidents, but part of a broader pattern. What may have seemed like small, explainable events at the time were, in fact, the first indicators of behaviors that would ultimately undermine the foundation of their marriage. By paying attention to these signs, he was able to begin piecing together a clearer picture, even as the emotional cost mounted. This period of suspicion, unease, and reflection became a critical chapter in his journey toward the painful but necessary truth he would later share with the world. The first signs of trouble are often subtle, almost imperceptible, yet they carry immense weight when compounded over time. For Harry, recognizing these red flags was both heartbreaking and clarifying. They forced him to confront difficult questions about trust, loyalty, and the reality of his relationship. This chapter in their story serves as a window into the complex emotional landscape of a high-profile marriage, where love, suspicion, public scrutiny, and private anguish intersect in ways that few can fully comprehend. From the very beginning, Meghan Markle's life was intertwined with Hollywood. As an actress, she moved in circles that blended glitz, glamour, and influence, a world that often blurred the boundaries between professional opportunity and personal entanglement. For Prince Harry, stepping into this world alongside his new wife was both exhilarating and, as he would later come to realize, perilous. Hollywood was a double-edged sword. It offered status, connections, and excitement. But it also presented temptations, hidden agendas, and a network of individuals whose intentions were not always clear. Initially, Harry approached Meghan's Hollywood connections with curiosity and openness. He understood that her career had shaped much of her identity and that friendships, both personal and professional, were important to her. Many of her colleagues were renowned actors, influential producers, and powerful agents who could open doors to opportunities far beyond the royal realm. At first, Harry was intrigued by the stories she shared and impressed by the caliber of people she knew. Social events, premieres, and private gatherings became common, and he found himself navigating a world of sparkling cocktails, red carpets, and whispered negotiations. However, over time, the initial excitement began to give way to concern. Harry noticed patterns emerging that suggested these connections were more than professional friendships. There were reports, later corroborated by insiders, of private meetings with prominent Hollywood figures that were not clearly linked to her career. Some meetings occurred late at night, others in exclusive, secluded venues, and many were accompanied by secrecy and evasiveness. Harry, who valued transparency, found these behaviors increasingly troubling. What might have seemed innocent to an outsider, after all, networking is part of the entertainment business, felt different behind closed doors, where trust and loyalty should have been paramount. The network of Hollywood temptation was complex. It was not just about personal attraction, but also power dynamics. Meghan's interactions with influential backers, financiers, and media figures gave her leverage in ways that were often hidden from Harry. These individuals wielded enormous influence, both in shaping careers and in controlling narratives. Some insiders described instances where Harry felt sidelined, excluded, or manipulated by the interplay of these relationships. For someone who had spent his life under scrutiny, the experience was disorienting and emotionally taxing, creating a sense that he was navigating not just a marriage, but an intricate web of social and professional intrigue. As Harry began to connect the dots, he realized that the boundaries between Meghan's personal and professional life were increasingly blurred. Meetings labeled as industry events often extended into private, intimate encounters. Conversations that were ostensibly casual sometimes carried undertones of flirtation, suggestion, or manipulation. The presence of cameras, agents, and intermediaries complicated matters further, creating ambiguity about the nature and intent of these interactions. Harry, accustomed to directness and honesty, found the opacity maddening and the implications impossible to ignore. Friends of Harry reported that he confided in them about his growing unease regarding Meghan's Hollywood network. He described feeling both frustrated and humiliated, caught between his desire to support her ambitions and his fear that her connections were being exploited in ways that undermined their marriage. The tension was compounded by the public scrutiny that came with being a royal. Every social appearance, every photograph, and every rumor was magnified, leaving Harry to navigate a maze of perception, reality, and rumor, often without clear guidance or support. One particularly troubling aspect was the influence of powerful backers. These individuals, often with significant financial or media clout, could create environments ripe for temptation. Harry observed interactions that seemed calculated to generate loyalty, dependency, or admiration, sometimes at the expense of marital fidelity. While it is impossible to quantify intent with certainty, the cumulative effect on Harry was undeniable. He felt increasingly isolated, unsure whom to trust, and deeply concerned about the implications for their relationship. What began as curiosity and openness slowly transformed into vigilance and suspicion, as he realized the stakes were higher than he had imagined. The combination of fame, wealth, and influence created fertile ground for infidelity. Harry noted patterns of behavior that suggested boundaries were being tested or crossed, sometimes subtly, sometimes brazenly. Invitations to private gatherings, messages that disappeared, and encounters that were never fully explained added layers of tension. Harry, who had grown up with an acute awareness of trust and betrayal within high-profile contexts, could not ignore the warning signs. Each incident, while perhaps explainable in isolation, formed a pattern that pointed toward a troubling reality. Despite his growing concerns, Harry initially attempted to address matters privately. He tried to communicate openly with Meghan, seeking clarity and reassurance. However, these conversations often ended with deflection, minimization, or denial, leaving him emotionally drained and increasingly distrustful. The Hollywood connections that once seemed exciting and aspirational had become a source of anxiety, confusion, and heartbreak, creating cracks in a marriage that had once seemed unshakable. Adding to the complexity was the role of the media. Hollywood thrives on gossip, speculation, and the amplification of scandal. Harry became aware that Meghan's network included individuals who could manipulate media narratives to their advantage. Whether intentional or not, this meant that certain encounters and communications were not merely private. They could become public, further destabilizing trust and fueling rumors. For Harry, the realization that their personal lives were entwined with a network capable of influencing public perception was both terrifying and demoralizing. By the second year of marriage, the cumulative effect of these Hollywood connections had taken a significant toll on Harry. The excitement of their early romance had given way to suspicion, stress, and emotional fatigue. He began documenting his concerns, confiding in select advisors, and attempting to discern patterns in what was happening behind the scenes. The presence of high-profile friends and backers, once a source of pride and intrigue, had become an emotional minefield, threatening not only the stability of their marriage, but also Harry's sense of self and security. In retrospect, Harry recognizes that the allure of Hollywood, its glamour, connections, and opportunities, was inseparable from its dangers. The same network that could elevate Meghan's career also carried the potential for betrayal, manipulation, and humiliation. For someone who had devoted his life to loyalty, trust, and honor, the challenge of navigating this world alongside a partner whose boundaries and intentions were increasingly opaque was profound. It forced him to confront difficult truths, reassess assumptions, and prepare for revelations that would shake the foundation of their relationship. The story of Hollywood connections and temptation is not merely about social circles or career opportunities. It is about the collision of power, ambition, and personal integrity. For Harry, the experience was a crucible, a period that tested not only his trust in Meghan, but also his capacity to endure emotional pain, navigate secrecy, and ultimately seek the truth. These formative experiences laid the groundwork for the revelations he would later share with the world, exposing the complexities and vulnerabilities inherent in a marriage played out under the unrelenting glare of public scrutiny and high-profile influence. The foundation of any marriage is trust, an invisible bond that holds two people together even in the most challenging circumstances. For Prince Harry, trust had always been a cornerstone of his relationships. Growing up in the royal family, he learned early that loyalty and honesty were not just virtues, they were survival mechanisms. Yet, despite this understanding, he would come to face a betrayal so profound that it shook him to his core, leaving scars that would linger long after the initial revelation. It all began with what seemed like minor inconsistencies, small omissions, unexplained absences, and vague responses to straightforward questions. At first, Harry attributed these moments to the pressures of Meghan's career, the demands of royal life, or the natural boundaries of a high-profile marriage. He wanted to give her space, to trust her, and to believe in the partnership they had built together. But as the months progressed, the inconsistencies accumulated, forming patterns that were difficult to ignore. The first clear breach of trust came in a form Harry could never have anticipated, a series of encounters with high-profile individuals from Meghan's past. These were people with significant influence in Hollywood, actors, producers, and financiers whose lives were intertwined with hers in ways that went beyond professional collaboration. Harry discovered through subtle hints, offhand comments, and eventually corroborating evidence that some of these encounters were not innocent. They involved secret meetings, private messages, and interactions that suggested a level of intimacy that transcended friendship. The moment Harry realized the extent of the betrayal was devastating. It was not a single incident, but a revelation that Meghan had engaged in multiple affairs during their marriage, each carefully concealed from him. The first confirmed instance involved a well-known Hollywood figure whose career Meghan had publicly supported. At first, Harry could not believe it. The idea that someone he loved, someone he had entrusted with his heart, could act in such a way was inconceivable. He replayed conversations, revisited events, and searched for signs he might have missed, questioning his judgment, his intuition, and his ability to read people. This betrayal was more than emotional. It was deeply personal and humiliating. For Harry, who had always valued transparency and loyalty, the knowledge that his marriage had been undermined from within was a heavy blow. He felt exposed, as if his private life had been invaded, manipulated, and distorted for reasons he could not fully comprehend. Friends close to Harry reported that he became withdrawn, struggling to reconcile the image of Meghan he had cherished with the reality that was now undeniable. The betrayal was not just about infidelity. It was about the deliberate deception and the emotional manipulation that accompanied it. One particularly painful aspect was the realization that the affairs were not random or isolated. They were connected to a broader network of influence, ambition, and opportunity. Meghan's relationships with certain Hollywood figures and powerful backers were intertwined with her public persona, her career trajectory, and her social leverage. Harry began to see that the betrayals were calculated, carried out in environments that allowed for secrecy and plausible deniability. The emotional weight of this understanding was immense. It was one thing to confront infidelity in a personal context, but entirely another to navigate it amidst the glare of media scrutiny and public expectation. Harry's response was complex. On one hand, he felt anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. On the other hand, he experienced confusion, self-doubt, and a lingering sense of responsibility. He questioned whether he had misjudged situations, overlooked warning signs, or failed to communicate effectively. The duality of emotions, love for someone he had once believed was unwaveringly committed, and the pain of realizing that commitment was compromised, created a turmoil that was both exhausting and isolating. The first confrontation with Meghan about these betrayals was fraught with tension. Harry approached the conversation seeking honesty, clarity, and reconciliation. He needed to understand the motives, the scope, and the truth. However, the discussion quickly became emotionally charged, with Meghan denying or deflecting aspects of the accusations, leaving Harry frustrated and even more uncertain. This interaction marked a turning point. It was the first time he confronted not only the infidelity itself, but also the deeper pattern of dishonesty and concealment that threatened the integrity of their marriage. In the aftermath, Harry took steps to protect himself emotionally. He confided selectively in close friends, advisors, and family members who could provide guidance, support, and perspective. He documented incidents, gathered information, and attempted to make sense of a situation that felt increasingly chaotic and unmanageable. Each revelation, each confirmation of betrayal, added layers to a narrative that was both painful and illuminating. It was a process of coming to terms with reality while grappling with the emotional fallout, a journey that demanded resilience, courage, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. The first betrayal also highlighted the complex dynamics of public life. For a royal, personal matters are rarely private. The potential for leaks, rumors, and media speculation amplified every emotion, every confrontation, and every decision. Harry was acutely aware that any misstep could be magnified, distorted, or weaponized. This reality added pressure, forcing him to navigate not only personal betrayal, but also the strategic implications of how to respond publicly, privately, and legally. The stakes were enormous. His reputation, his family, and his mental health were all on the line. Through this experience, Harry began to understand the profound consequences of secrecy and deception within a marriage. Trust, once broken, is difficult to restore. Even the smallest act of dishonesty can ripple outward, affecting confidence, intimacy, and emotional security. Harry realized that the betrayal was not a singular event, but a symptom of deeper issues, including manipulation, ambition, and a disregard for mutual respect. The emotional cost was significant, leaving him vulnerable, guarded, and determined to seek clarity and resolution. By the end of this chapter in his life, Harry had come to a difficult but necessary conclusion. The first betrayal was not just a personal failing on Meghan's part. It was a catalyst that revealed the vulnerabilities in their marriage, the challenges of navigating high-profile relationships, and the hidden forces at play in their lives. It marked the beginning of a journey toward truth, accountability, and eventual revelation. A journey that would not only expose personal heartbreak, but also shed light on the complexities of power, ambition, and deception at the intersection of Hollywood and royalty. After the shock of the first betrayal, Harry began to see a pattern that was both disturbing and intricate. Meghan's interactions with Hollywood figures were no longer isolated incidents, but part of a network of relationships that seemed to operate almost like a carefully orchestrated web. Each connection carried weight: social, financial, and sometimes even political. What initially appeared to be professional networking or friendly acquaintances revealed itself as something far more personal, and for Harry, far more painful. The first realization hit Harry when he noticed subtle patterns in Meghan's communications. Emails that were quickly deleted, phone calls taken in secret, and meetings scheduled under ambiguous pretexts all raised red flags. Initially, he tried to rationalize these actions. Perhaps she was protecting her privacy, managing her career carefully, or shielding herself from media scrutiny. But the repeated nature of these occurrences, coupled with the eventual confirmation from multiple sources, painted a picture he could no longer ignore. Meghan was involved in multiple affairs with men who held influence and power in Hollywood, a world Harry knew only peripherally, but now found himself entangled in emotionally. These men were not just celebrities. They were producers, directors, and financiers who had the ability to shape careers. Their interest in Meghan went beyond casual friendship, crossing lines that Harry had assumed were inviolable in a committed relationship. The encounters were often disguised as professional collaborations, charity events, or casual social gatherings, making them difficult to confront directly. For Harry, the deception was twofold. There was the affair itself, and there was the elaborate effort to conceal it. Each hidden meeting, each clandestine communication, felt like a deliberate attempt to undermine the trust at the core of their marriage. The emotional impact on Harry was profound. He had entered the marriage with love, respect, and an unwavering belief in Meghan's loyalty. Discovering that she had willingly engaged with powerful figures behind his back was not only a personal betrayal, but a public humiliation. Harry, who had been under intense media scrutiny for most of his life, now faced the additional sting of knowing that his private pain was tied to individuals whose influence extended far beyond their personal interactions. The betrayal was amplified by the high-profile nature of the people involved. One particularly striking example involved a well-known Hollywood producer whose career Meghan had publicly endorsed. Private messages later revealed a level of intimacy that crossed professional boundaries, confirming Harry's worst suspicions. It was not a fleeting interaction. It was repeated, deliberate, and concealed. Harry wrestled with anger, disbelief, and a deep sense of betrayal, questioning how someone he loved so deeply could betray him so systematically. The realization forced him to confront not only Meghan's actions, but also the motivations behind them: ambition, desire, and perhaps a need for validation that superseded marital fidelity. Harry also had to navigate the psychological warfare of secrecy and deception. In high-profile marriages, the pressure to maintain appearances is immense. The public expects a perfect partnership, one that embodies loyalty, decorum, and stability. Yet behind the carefully curated images and public appearances, Harry was grappling with a private reality that was anything but perfect. The hidden affairs, the secretive communications, and the calculated interactions with influential figures created an emotional labyrinth from which there was no easy escape. The network of affairs also carried implications beyond personal betrayal. Each relationship connected Meghan to resources, influence, and opportunities that could potentially manipulate situations to her advantage. Harry realized that these relationships were not merely emotional entanglements. They were strategic alignments that amplified her visibility, increased her power, and subtly shifted the dynamics of their marriage. This added a layer of complexity. The affairs were not just acts of infidelity, but tools in a broader game of social and professional leverage, leaving Harry feeling not only betrayed, but strategically outmaneuvered. Through this painful process, Harry began to understand the challenges of navigating a partner's dual worlds, the intimate, personal life of marriage and the public, professional world of fame and influence. Meghan's relationships with Hollywood figures blurred these boundaries, creating a space where emotional intimacy, ambition, and deception coexisted. For Harry, disentangling these overlapping spheres was both emotionally exhausting and intellectually perplexing. It forced him to question how much he truly knew about his partner and how much of their shared life had been genuine. The fallout from these revelations extended beyond emotional betrayal. Harry's friends and family became involuntary witnesses to the web of deception, offering support, advice, and perspective. Conversations with close confidants often centered on strategies for confronting the truth, protecting oneself emotionally, and navigating the implications for public image. These discussions underscored the intersection of personal pain and public scrutiny, highlighting the unique pressures of being a royal caught in a complex web of private betrayal and global attention. As Harry began to piece together the extent of Meghan's affairs, he confronted not only the immediate emotional consequences, but also the long-term implications for trust, partnership, and self-perception. Each revelation chipped away at the foundation of their marriage, leaving questions that could not be easily answered. Could forgiveness be possible? Was reconciliation achievable? And most painfully, how could he move forward knowing that the woman he loved had willingly breached the sacred trust of their union? By the end of this chapter, Harry had come to a stark understanding. The web of Hollywood affairs was not just a series of isolated incidents, but a calculated pattern of behavior that fundamentally undermined the marriage from within. It exposed vulnerabilities, manipulated emotions, and leveraged power dynamics in ways that were difficult to confront but impossible to ignore. The journey through this web of deception was just beginning, and Harry realized that the road ahead would demand courage, clarity, and an unwavering commitment to truth, even when that truth was painful, public, and inescapable. The emotional fallout from discovering the depth and breadth of Meghan's betrayals hit Harry like a tidal wave. For someone who had spent his life under the glare of public scrutiny, navigating pain in private was never easy. But this was different. This was personal, intimate, and raw. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than any tabloid scandal, any misreported incident, or any public misunderstanding. It struck at the very core of his being, shaking his confidence, his judgment, and his sense of safety within the marriage he had once cherished. In the initial days following the first confirmed affair, Harry experienced a profound sense of isolation. Friends noticed the change immediately. The once vibrant, humorous, and approachable prince became withdrawn, often retreating into silence when surrounded by those who loved him most. There were moments when he would walk alone for hours, lost in thought, wrestling with the duality of love and betrayal. The human mind struggles with reconciling two conflicting realities, the person you love and the actions that betray that love. For Harry, every memory of joy shared with Meghan became tinged with doubt. Every shared smile, now a potential mask hiding deception. Family dynamics added another layer of complexity. While Harry could confide in a select few, the royal family operates under a code of discretion and public composure. Discussions of personal heartbreak were often curtailed by the necessity to maintain appearances. Even within the private confines of family homes, there was an unspoken expectation that struggles should be managed quietly. This expectation amplified Harry's sense of loneliness as he balanced his need for emotional support with the constraints of public image. Mental health challenges emerged quickly. Sleep became elusive, plagued by recurring thoughts, imagined scenarios, and the gnawing question, how could someone I trusted so completely betray me so thoroughly? Harry faced moments of intense anger, which were often followed by crushing waves of sadness. The spectrum of emotions was exhausting, leaving him physically drained and emotionally raw. In conversations with close confidants, he admitted that the pain was compounded by the feeling of helplessness, knowing about the betrayals but being unsure how to address them without causing further damage to himself, the marriage, or his public image. Isolation also manifested socially. Events that once brought joy, charity galas, official appearances, and social gatherings, now became reminders of a life that felt increasingly performative. Harry attended these events with Meghan, but beneath the surface, every smile and handshake was filtered through the lens of suspicion and mistrust. Interactions that once felt natural became exercises in observation. Subtle gestures, hidden glances, and whispered conversations were analyzed for meaning. This constant mental vigilance contributed to emotional fatigue, making it difficult for Harry to experience genuine connection or relaxation. The sense of betrayal also sparked an internal struggle with self-blame. Harry, despite knowing that Meghan's actions were not his fault, found himself questioning his judgment, his decisions, and his ability to read people. He replayed moments, wondering if he had missed signs or overlooked subtle hints that could have revealed the truth sooner. This self-reflection, while natural in response to betrayal, became an additional source of anguish. He grappled with the delicate balance of holding Meghan accountable while not eroding his own sense of self-worth. Media scrutiny intensified this emotional struggle. News outlets, gossip columns, and social media discussions amplified every detail of Harry and Meghan's public life. While much of the coverage focused on Meghan, Harry felt the weight of public perception pressing down on him. Every interview, every photograph, and every headline reminded him that the world was watching, judging, and dissecting his responses. This relentless scrutiny transformed private pain into a performative burden, making it harder to navigate emotions authentically. Therapy and counseling became essential lifelines. Harry began working with mental health professionals to process the betrayal, manage anxiety, and regain emotional stability. Through therapy, he confronted not only the external acts of betrayal, but also the internalized effects, trust issues, fear of vulnerability, and the challenge of rebuilding his emotional resilience. These sessions were not easy. They demanded honesty, reflection, and the courage to face truths that were painful and complex. Yet, they also provided a framework for understanding the emotional landscape, offering strategies to cope with both immediate turmoil and long-term consequences. The isolation Harry experienced was compounded by the sense of strategic manipulation. He realized that some of Meghan's actions were not only personal betrayals, but also tactical moves, designed to consolidate power, influence public perception, and advance her career. This awareness added a layer of distrust that permeated all aspects of the marriage. Every interaction, every request, and every explanation from Meghan was filtered through a lens of potential strategy, making it increasingly difficult for Harry to experience unguarded intimacy or genuine connection. Support from trusted friends became invaluable. Individuals who had known Harry for years offered guidance, perspective, and empathy. They reminded him that betrayal is a reflection of the betrayer's choices, not a measure of his own worth. Their support helped anchor him, providing a counterbalance to the overwhelming emotions of anger, sadness, and confusion. Conversations with these confidants often became strategic as well as emotional, focusing on how to navigate the complex interplay of private pain and public scrutiny. Ultimately, the emotional fallout was not limited to personal anguish. It began to influence decisions about the future of the marriage. Harry grappled with whether reconciliation was possible, whether trust could be restored, and what boundaries were necessary to protect himself from further harm. Each choice carried profound implications, not only for his relationship with Meghan, but also for his own sense of identity, agency, and emotional well-being. By the end of this chapter, Harry's struggle and isolation had reached a critical juncture. The betrayals, the secrecy, and the emotional manipulation had eroded the foundation of their marriage. Yet, amid the pain, there was a growing clarity. Understanding the depth of the deception was the first step toward reclaiming control, making informed decisions, and ultimately confronting the truth publicly. The emotional fallout, while devastating, became a catalyst for introspection, resilience, and the pursuit of transparency, a journey that would continue to define Harry's path forward. As the storm of betrayal continued to swirl in Harry's personal life, he faced a dilemma that few could truly understand: the impossibility of keeping such private pain hidden from the public eye. Being a royal means living life under a constant microscope, and every action, every expression, and every decision is scrutinized for its social and political implications. The world watched as Harry navigated a complex landscape of personal betrayal, media scrutiny, and public expectation, creating a tension that was almost unbearable. Harry's initial instinct was to protect the marriage and preserve appearances. He believed that loyalty, discretion, and patience might prevent the private chaos from spilling into the public domain. The idea was simple yet profoundly challenging. Maintain the facade of a united front while contending with the emotional and psychological reality behind closed doors. This meant attending public events with Meghan, sharing smiles for cameras, and projecting stability, even when internally he was grappling with heartbreak and disbelief. The dichotomy between public appearances and private reality became increasingly stark. At high-profile events, Harry would smile, pose, and engage with dignitaries, celebrities, and the press, all while carrying the weight of knowing about Meghan's affairs. Every handshake, every casual laugh, and every public statement was now performed with the knowledge that behind the cameras, his trust had been shattered. It created a cognitive dissonance that was emotionally draining, as he constantly measured the authenticity of every interaction against the backdrop of betrayal. Behind closed doors, however, the reality was profoundly different. Conversations with Meghan, once filled with warmth and intimacy, became strategic exercises in vigilance. Questions were asked cautiously, responses analyzed meticulously, and any inconsistency immediately triggered suspicion. The private space that should have been a refuge of love and trust became a battlefield, where emotional negotiation and careful observation replaced affection and openness. Harry's personal life, once grounded in mutual understanding, had transformed into a daily exercise in caution and skepticism. The struggle to keep secrets also extended to family interactions. Harry was caught between the desire to seek guidance from his family and the need to shield them from scandal. Royal protocol and the imperative of public composure made it challenging to discuss personal matters freely. In this environment, Harry often felt alone, isolated by the very framework designed to protect the institution and its members. The tension between maintaining family unity and protecting personal integrity became a constant source of stress and anxiety. Adding to the complexity was the role of media speculation. Every rumor, every leaked detail, and every public narrative threatened to expose the private turmoil. Harry was acutely aware that once the story broke, it could not be contained. The press had a history of exploiting vulnerabilities, particularly those of the royal family, and Harry recognized that his personal heartbreak could easily become a public spectacle. This awareness created an additional layer of pressure, as he had to navigate emotional responses while anticipating potential media fallout. The strategic concealment of betrayal also required meticulous planning. Harry became increasingly cautious about what he shared, with whom, and in what context. Trust became a scarce resource, even among those closest to him. Every communication was filtered through the lens of potential exposure. Every conversation weighed against the risk of public discovery. This heightened vigilance was both mentally exhausting and emotionally isolating, further intensifying the struggle between public composure and private despair. Even within Meghan's sphere of influence, Harry sensed the challenge of separating fact from fabrication. Her public persona, carefully curated and meticulously managed, contrasted sharply with the private reality he had come to understand. The charismatic, confident, and socially adept image projected to the world concealed the layers of deceit and manipulation that had eroded their marriage. Navigating this duality required Harry to constantly evaluate interactions, decipher intentions, and anticipate moves, all while maintaining a semblance of normalcy in public life. The psychological toll of this dual existence manifested in multiple ways. Harry experienced heightened stress, difficulty sleeping, and moments of acute anxiety. The need to constantly monitor his environment, anticipate potential threats, and maintain public composure placed a significant strain on his mental health. Therapy and counseling sessions became vital tools for managing these pressures, helping him develop strategies to cope with the relentless tension between public expectation and private reality. The struggle to keep secrets also highlighted broader issues of control and agency. Harry realized that the very act of concealing the truth, while protective in some respects, limited his ability to fully process his emotions. The effort to maintain appearances, protect loved ones, and navigate social expectations created a paradox. Safeguarding privacy required sacrifice, but that very sacrifice delayed healing. Each moment spent managing perception was a moment diverted from introspection, emotional processing, and self-care. By the end of this chapter, the complexity of public versus private life had become starkly apparent to Harry. The betrayals he faced.